So I think there's two major things that have helped me. One, I think, is understanding that so many of these players and their wives live a life of being sort of on guard, of being taken advantage of. So many people want from them, that coming from a place of help and not really asking for anything back, I think is quite helpful, and really meaning it. I don't do this to get taken.
Hello, Empower Nation. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. I'm your host, Angela Duncan. Today's episode, I get to interview Jen Daniels. She's an athlete relocation specialist in the real estate market. We're going to talk about how she got started in this very specific niche market. We're going to talk about her clientele's needs, some fun stories, and her predictions on how the NIL is going to affect the future of real estate. This episode is sponsored by empowerhermoney.com. Head over there and get your free guide to help you save money on your business insurance. Hi, Jen. Welcome to Empower Her Money podcast. How are you today?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited. I have been in the real estate world a long time, but you are definitely in a whole different niche market that I have not been exposed to. So I'm excited for today. But I would love for you to first start off kind of how you got to the real estate market.
So basically when I was in college, I was majoring in business marketing. I wanted to do brand development, that kind of thing. And then decided, after getting sort of through some of those courses, that wasn't actually what I wanted to do. I wanted to be more entrepreneurial, own my own business, as opposed to work for other companies. And I have family in real estate. So I said, okay, well, I can develop brands for myself if I get into real estate. And so when I got out of college, went that route instead of working for a company.
Gotcha. So you got your real estate license in what time frame?
So I was 22, so at this point, many years ago, about 18 years ago. Yeah.
Gotcha. So right before the market kind of took a turn for a much different market.
Yes. And actually I started in California and the market was already turning. So I got into the market at probably the hardest possible time.
Yeah. But I think that's good because, you didn't know any different. You didn't know that you had to actually work in real estate to make money. So I think that was a great time frame to enter because it really helped you learn a lot more.
I agree. It was hard at the time, but in hindsight, I learned how to work hard. I learned that it wasn't easy. And I think that has served me now throughout my career.
Yeah. Now you serve a more niche market. How did you transition or decide to go from just regular, selling residential real estate to really focusing on one market?
So yeah, so in regards to the sports market, basically what happened is I played tennis through college. And so quite a few of my friends through college, through playing sports in college, either became professional athletes, became lawyers for professional athletes, became agents for professional athletes, just because of a natural, my natural friend group being in college tennis. And one of my good friends in, California was a lawyer for a lot of baseball players who ended up training in the off season in LA. So I sort of fell into that niche, just by my natural, sphere of influence, and loved it. It was, I connect really well with those clients. I feel like the way I serve those clients, works really, really well. And so I just decided to run with it. And expand outside of, that little tiny bit of baseball players who are living in the off season in LA and work with the teams and agents. And so during that time, I just decided, I'm gonna go full bore into this particular niche of client because I work really well with them. I really like it. I enjoy it. And that's how it expanded.
Now, I've never worked in this market. So what do you think that is unique that maybe you need to understand versus someone who's working with a first-time home buyer?
So I think there's two things. One is I'm very business minded, and I think that works well with them, mostly because a lot of the homes I sell them aren't their forever homes necessarily. So they are thinking, even if it ends up being their forever home, they're thinking more in terms of what happens if I get traded? What happen, what happens if I sign in a different city? Can I get out of it? Can I rent it? So it's a much more business minded transaction than, let's say, a first time home buyer who's looking for their forever home or more of an emotional purchase. It's very unemotional with these athletes. So I think that's a big difference. The other thing is I look at what they need, intangible needs. So do they need help with moving company? Do they need a shot? Like there's other things that they need that I feel like I can sort of anticipate those needs at this point, particularly being in this for so long, that I can provide that for them without them even asking. And I think they appreciate it in a way because they have moved so many times that maybe someone who's only moved one or two or three times in their life don't necessarily need or know they need. So I think that's the two major differences is just they appreciate basically being taken care of on the relocation side of it. And it's a much more business to business transaction.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And what you offer and do for your clients is more of a full service
Correct.
versus let me find your home and then have fun. Here's the keys.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think probably the celebrity aspect of it, because you've been in that world, someone like me, I live in South Florida. I'm a hockey fan. So if I saw
Yeah.
some of the hockey players, I'd probably geek out a little bit, whereas they don't want that. Like you said, they want to be treated, this is a business, it's a transaction. They're just a person
Yeah.
buying a house. So I can get that too.
Yeah. And there are times when depending on the person or this, who it is, you geek out a little bit, but it is nice because you do get to know them on a more personal level and you realize they are just like us and they have needs and so to try to help fill those needs, I pride myself in.
Yeah. Do you have any stories without naming names, protecting the privacy of your clients, but do you have any like interesting stories that perhaps happened in a transaction that you wouldn't normally see in a residential or regular residential sell?
Um, there's a lot, but I think one of the more interesting times in my career was when I was, 3.5 years ago now, the Seattle Kraken were an expansion team. So basically everybody was moving to Seattle at one time. And I did assist with all of those moves that we're also going through COVID during this time. So
Mm.
because many hockey players are international, we had to double test coming into the US and they had to double test going out of it. So I virtually did 90% of those virtually.
Hmm.
And so it was just one thing after another where it was a very quick timeline. They basically were moving from the city they came from, which was all over the country, to Seattle, and they had to do it very, very quickly. So they were all buying the same house in the same area. But also many of them just chose not to come to the US at that time because it was so difficult with the COVID restrictions to get in the country and then get back out of the country, that we had to figure out a way to make them feel very comfortable doing a lot of it virtually. So that was kind of an interesting time where I felt like we did a pretty good job on that, and most of them were quite happy when they came to town. But most of them had never even been to Seattle. We didn't have a pro team. It's not like they were all being traded to a city that they've played in before. Most of them have never even been to Seattle. And so it was teaching them about the city at the same time. And it was a lot of pressure because, it was me explaining the city and the areas and everything without them ever being there. And it worked. Overwhelmingly it worked out. And I'm glad most of them were happy, but that was the challenge that like I never anticipated happening.
Yeah, and I imagine too, as athletes are moving to a different city, they're going to ask you some questions too, like, local restaurants
Right.
or, places to shop or something like that. And so being able to provide them with that information, being that they're new, they have a lot on their plate going on, just taking that full service approach, I think is pretty helpful too.
Yes. And I think too, they're more open because they've done this before, where if I do ask them that question, it's like, what do you like to do? What does your wife or girlfriend like to do? What kind of neighborhood do you want? Like they're a bit more understanding of what that is because they've moved enough times that they understand what they like, what they don't like. So those conversations are definitely had, and they're pretty important in the process because a move does happen quite quickly.
Yeah, and it's a different scope of questions, definitely. Instead of, what size house do you want? That the basic information, but that whole lifestyle around moving is also
Right.
important.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what advice would you have for perhaps maybe an real estate agent that might be thinking about getting into this, very specific niche that would help them to be more successful?
So I think there's two major things that have helped me. One, I think, is understanding that so many of these players and their wives live a life of being sort of on guard, of being taken advantage of. So many people want from them, that coming from a place of help and not really asking for anything back, I think is quite helpful, and really meaning it. I don't do this to get tickets. I don't do this to get jerseys. I do this because I really genuinely love helping. And I think if you lead with that, they feel it, their agents feel it, their wives feel it, and that's very helpful in building the business. And I think the other thing is just really truly, well, I guess there's two more things, really truly understanding what it is that they need. They don't necessarily always want the biggest, the most expensive, so understanding that there's other needs than the flashy houses. And lastly, I would say it's really hard work to keep, to get into this niche and to keep it going. It takes a lot of follow-up and proactive work. But once you establish your name, once you get in, it is a great referral base because they do move all the time, and it is a very small world. And so, if you do work hard and you do a good job, they will refer you. They absolutely will. 100% of my business comes from referrals. And they want to, that's the other thing, they want to refer you, but it does take a lot of work.
Yeah, and obviously you doing the incredible job that you do is a big basis for them referring to you.
Yeah, and again, I think that a lot of it comes from the fact that I genuinely love it and I love helping them. And I don't know that they get a lot of that. I think it's more of I want to put him on an Instagram, or I want to show that I can get field tickets, or whatever the case may be. And I think coming from that place, you're not going to be very successful.
Hmm. Now, being in real estate and in the sports world, do you think that there's going to be any changes in the future when it comes to sports? I mean, I don't think that we'll have less teams. I think we'll continue to expand, but I'm curious because you're in the market all the time and kind of have a pulse. What do you think?
I think the thing that's going to be most interesting over the next 5 years is how NIL will change. So now with college players getting paid,
Mm.
will they start investing earlier? So a lot of rookies don't buy until their second contract, which I totally understand. But if you're starting to get paid in college, is that going to change the way they invest? Are they going to buy homes sort of at home where they grew up first because they don't necessarily have a pro team that they're associated with? So I think that's one thing that will really change the dynamic of how early and how much they invest is, how much are they getting paid in college?
Yeah, and then certainly the need for a professional to help teach them because I can't imagine like my daughter's
Yes.
21, she's been in real estate in a family of real estate for a long time, but for a kid who hasn't, like how do they even decide what to buy, where to buy, how much to spend, without like going over and above the high end of things. They definitely need a professional like you to teach them.
I agree. And I think too, there's some unbelievable financial advisors that work alongside of us that I hope that these players also lean on. Because you basically can set yourself up for a long time, even through college now. And I think there's a lot of investment opportunities. For example, do you buy a place near the college you're at while you're living at college and then rent it out when you leave? Because that seems like a huge revenue stream that could be tapped into now that they're being paid. So I agree, having professionals advise them earlier is going to hopefully also be more common and be a positive change.
Yeah, awesome. Jen, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, learn more about what you do, what's the best way for them to reach you?
So probably the best way is Instagram. It's the Jen Daniels. And then I do have a website, but my Instagram I'm super active on. I love connecting with people. So that would probably be the best way.
Awesome. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for your time today and your insight in this very specific but amazing real estate market.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Empower Her Money podcast. I am grateful for you. Please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, like this podcast, share it, subscribe, and let's keep teaching others how to take control and be empowered with their finances.